Hello and welcome to part 2 of our discussion on braking. In this section, we're going to take what we've learned about braking techniques and discuss in greater detail how to apply them, where to apply them, and some great ways to practice these techniques in a non-racing situation. As we discussed in the vehicle dynamics video, you must think about the transfer of weight under a braking situation. When you apply the brake, the weight of the car transfers toward the front tires. This means the front tires have more grip than the rear tires. This transfer of weight is why braking systems have something called brake bias. Brake bias is the difference in pedal pressure distributed to the front and rear wheels and helps to compensate for this loading difference. It can be adjusted when setting up a car for a particular track. Too much front bias and the front tires lock before the rear tires do. Too much rear bias and just the opposite will occur. If the brake bias is just right, your braking distance is minimized. Slight rear bias can help with rotation at turn-in because the rear tires will have a smaller contact patch and will be more susceptible to slip. The faster a car is traveling, the harder the brake pedal can be pushed before tire lockup. In most race cars, this is primarily because at faster speeds, there is aerodynamic downforce that increases the tire's grip, and as the car slows, that downforce, or the grip, lessens. This means that it's easier to get the brakes to lock the slower the car is going. Therefore, the initial application is very important. You want to take off as much speed as early in the brake zone as possible, so as you get closer to the turn-in point, you're able to modulate off the pressure. Modulation is also necessary if you lock the tire at any time during the braking application. Try to get the tire rolling as soon as possible with as little release of pedal pressure as you can manage. Regardless of what kind of braking you're doing, start with a conservative early breakpoint. There are few mistakes harder to fix than a breakpoint left too late. Establish what level of braking is available and then work the breakpoint closer to the turn-in. If threshold braking, when you reach the point where it's difficult to make it to the apex, you know you've gone far enough. If braking and turning at the same time, experiment with subtle changes in brake levels to see the effect on how well the car turns in. For brush braking situations, try lighter pressure or shorter duration and observe the results. If you're trail braking, experiment with the rate at which you release the brake pedal and observe the different rates of rotation. Typically, the faster you release the pedal, the more abrupt the rotation. A good way to hone the braking skills we've discussed is to start with straight-line threshold braking. Pick the Skip Barber formula car and go to Lime Rock and stop the car on the front straight before the start-finish line where there's an access road on the driver's left. Accelerate through the gears up to third and hold the speed at 6,000 RPM. Start braking at the 6 board and see how quickly you can bring the car to a stop. You should be able to stop it just before the 4 board. Notice the different level of tire noise between lockup and no lockup. Be sure to practice this many times. Instead of taking a whole lap to get back to the starting point, make a U-turn and drive back up. Only do this during a test session. For another practice session, select either the Skip Barber car or the late model and go to a small oval track like Lanier. Here, work on brake turning skills and experiment with different levels of brake and steering input. Next, try a great trail braking corner like Turn 2 at Mazda Raceway Laguna Seca. Again, experiment with different rates of pedal release while in the Skip Barber car and observe the effects. If there's no rotation, you need more turn-in speed. Experiment with changing the brake bias for all of the situations we've mentioned and notice the effects. With a little practice and concentration on your braking techniques, you should see an improvement in your performance in braking zones and corners. Ultimately, this will result in smoother sailing on the track and, of course, faster lap times. Good luck out there.